Hi, everyone. It's a privilege to be talking in front of you all, and thanks for the amazing musical introduction this morning. I'm not musical at all. I kind of feel like Madonna with this on, but I've not got the voice or the boobs or any of that stuff. Anyway, so yeah, I'm Richard from Jason Bruges Studio. I'm going to talk a little bit about JBS, start answering this question, where are we from? So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about me. So I'm not this kid. No documentary evidence exists of me taking things to bits for good reasons, but I was like this kid. I basically took everything apart in the house. So given the opportunity, I dismantled the TV, which really pissed off my brother and sister, because there's only one in the house. Don't ever do this, by the way, it's really dangerous. If it's an old school TV, like a CRT TV, you'll probably electrocute yourself and die. I also, there we go, dismantled this beautiful 1987 Austin Maestro, which my parents weren't very happy about. And then finally, my crowning glory was trying to fix my mum's broken washing machine and succeeding in setting the kitchen on fire. So, that resulted in them hiding the tools from me for a while. But it also meant that I went to uni to study engineering. So I started off at the University of Sheffield studying electrical engineering, and I thought that would be perfect for me because I loved electronics, I loved mechanics, I loved taking things to bits, and what could go wrong? Well, it turned out that electrical engineering required an awful lot of maths and a lot of theory, and I really wasn't very good at that. So I was kind of a bit stuck, and I was living with some people who were studying architecture at the time, and it looked really good, it looked really interesting. I did art A-level, and so I went to go see the head of the architecture school at the time and said, look, I don't think engineering's for me, can I switch to architecture? And he took one look at my A-level grades and said, no, you can't, under no circumstances. So I went and had a crappy job over the summer, and fortunately the head of school changed over the summer, so then I went back at the end of the summer and I was able to switch. Now, I was really lucky and privileged to be able to do this because I also did it at a time in the UK where education, like university education, was pretty cheap, and that's not something you can do anymore. So I was really, really lucky to essentially have the opportunity to switch what I was studying. So yeah, I switched to architecture, loved it. I then went and worked in the Netherlands for a bit, and I went back to do my diploma course at the Bartlett School of Architecture in London, which was taught by this chap called Stephen Gage, who's on the bottom there, and it was the same unit as Jason Bruges, obviously set up the studio. So there I studied in a unit called Unit 14, and that's a group that's kind of really interested in architecture, technology, and people. So we built kind of crazy machines, like appendages that stuck onto your body and stuff like that. So Unit 14 was really influenced in the study of, or by the study of cybernetics. In a nutshell, cybernetics is the scientific study of how humans, animals, and machines control and communicate with each other. Now, the chap on the right is a chap called Gordon Pask. He was this amazing guy who was building machines from the 50s right way through kind of the 60s and 70s. But he was also interested in architecture, so he taught at the Architectural Association in the AA in the 1960s. This is one of his installations. This is at the ICA in London in 1968, and it's called Colloquy of Mobiles. It's pretty bonkers. So the big kind of bulbous things are females. The dangly kind of mobile-like stuff are males. And they communicate to one another through light and sound. So the females can kind of spin on their axes, and the males can spin on their axes as well, and they kind of beep and make noises and flash lights at each other, and generally try and catch each other's attention. Now, what's quite interesting about this is that, well, a couple of things, but one of which is that Pascal always saw the kind of the person, the human, as part of the system. So you could come into this thing, which was doing its stuff, and you could shine a light around, and you could beep at it, and that would change how it would behave. Yeah, it's kind of some of the very first interactive environments. Yeah, here we are. So males, females, fiberglass bodies, stimuluses and sensors, and it's all about a conversation between the environment and also the conversation with the people who are in it. All of this was done before the advent of the microprocessor. So Pascal was building his first sensory environment systems in the 50s, and this one was in the 60s. It was all done using proper hard code and valves and crazy stuff. So JBS are really, so this is his Musicolor system from 1950 something. These are some diagrams for colloquy. So JBS are really interested in this world. What are the relationships between the systems that we create, the environment, and the observers within them? So we're a bit kind of in the middle of this Venn diagram. So we're interested in people, space, and technology explored through the realms of art, architecture, and time-based design. Jason set the studio up 16 years ago in a garage in East London, and I've been with the studio for about 10 years now. So this is one of our really early pieces. It was made for a wildlife charity called WWF, so World Wildlife Foundation. And they gave us 100 of their old panda collection boxes and asked us, what could you do with these? So, wait for a moment. Then we made them follow you around the room. It's pretty creepy. So, yeah, scary pandas. Anyway, so we broadly split our work up into two categories. So the first category is artworks, where we're commissioned as artists to create pieces of art or kind of works of art that can be temporary or permanent, live in the public realm. And the second bit that we kind of categorize ourselves in is what we call design work. And this is typically a more constrained brief where we might be working for a brand or for an agency or trying to create an experience for a museum. It doesn't mean it's less interesting to do. Some of these projects are some of our most interesting projects, but it's just slightly different, and it's just how we categorize it. We're really lucky that we work all over the world. Very privileged to be able to do that. And in order to deliver our projects, we have an amazing team of pretty incredible people. Architects, artists, engineers, computational designers, coders, project managers. They're all brilliant, and I'm very lucky to work with them all. So, what's a typical project? Everyone is pretty different, which is great, but also a complete nightmare. So I'll talk you through one. So this is a piece for a perfume museum in Paris, and it's about the relationship between the perfumer and their assistant. So perfume is never made by one person. It's not made by the perfumer. It actually requires two people. So the perfumer dreams up the scent, and the assistant essentially makes the scent from its constituent components. And there's a reason for that. So hopefully this is going to be messing with your brains a bit. You will be able to chase some black dots around the room by changing your focus. So this is something called the scintillating grid illusion. And it is working because the photoreceptors in your eye are getting saturated, and they are affecting the neighboring receptors in your eye. So that's actually quite similar to the reason why you need two people to make perfume, basically. So the person handling the individual constituent components of the perfume, their sense of scent also becomes colored or tainted during the process. So they're not able to actually really appreciate what the final result is. So you've got the perfumer who dreams it all up, and the assistant who's kind of making it. So we're also quite interested in these motion studies. These are Frank Galbraith motion studies from kind of the turn of the century. I think this was like 1913, something like that. And we wondered if we could create a piece that talked about the motion of the assistant and the process of creating perfume. So the perfumer's assistant uses a piece of furniture called a perfumer's organ. That's an odd name, there you go. This is an old school one. In reality, these days, it actually looks a bit more like this. Nonetheless, it's kind of the same thing where the constituent components are laid out in a very structured way. So we spoke to a lot of perfumers about the process. So this is our kind of initial concept sketch where we imagined a digital perfumer's organ that used beams of laser light and prisms to represent the coming together of all the different constituent components of fragrance. So why lasers? Lasers because of precision, and that's a metaphor for the scientific precision that's required in the making of perfume, and also the same with prisms. So each raw ingredient of the organ is represented by a glass prism. The different notes are represented by the size of the units. So, in a perfume, you also have different what's called notes. So you have like delicate top notes, which are like this. Yay, it worked. Oh, dong. Kind of heart notes, which sit at the center of the fragrance, and bass notes, which are kind of the underlying part of the fragrance. So we started by exploring a number of different potential forms for the organ and layouts for the prisms. So we ended up with this kind of semicircular tiered thing, which is the end one. Looks like it gives a clear view of everything. We do a lot of parametric design as part of the process. So this is Houdini, which is a piece of software we use to do some parametric design to look at kind of layout, form, space, all that kind of stuff. It's quite important, so obviously we needed to understand all the angles of this, so how the laser is going to work with the prisms, how it's going to function in 3D, plan, elevation. The next critical part of the process is prototyping and testing. So we've got a workshop in our studio, and we prototype and test pretty much everything we do at one-to-one. This is one of our designers, Dagny, in the toilet of our studio, because it's the only place that's really dark, messing around with some laser pens. So just testing some of the prisms, testing some of the angles, seeing how it would work. This is a bit more of an advanced prototype, so this is using white laser, but it's actually an RGB laser because there's no such thing as a white laser. The three colors come together to make white. Ooh. Yes. Okay, so the raw kind of ingredients of prisms are laid out in alphabetical order, as in the actual perfumer's organ, where each prism is made up of optical glass and placed on the kind of the structure. The balancing kind of prisms represent the balance that's required in the perfume, and the intention is that users can select certain components and understand where they sit in the organ. Alternatively, they can select fragrances and see how the constituent components come together. The light organ can make lots of different constellations for lots of different fragrances. And so here are some kind of constellations mapped out for a cologne, an oriental, and a floral. They appear different in 3 dimensions, kind of creating their own 3D space or shape in light. And so this is the format for the whole organ, which was worked out with perfumers to make sure it was accurate. And here are a range of different fragrances worked out, again with the help of the perfumers. And so each constituent component of the fragrance has its own sound. So we worked together with a sound composer to develop a series of sounds that would create harmonious kind of soundscapes for each constellation. So, it's quiet. Can we turn it up a bit? Hey, there we go. This is Ami salicylate. I'll get all of this wrong. And then lavender oil, German oil. I don't know what's going on, I'm just pressing the button. And tonka bean. There's tonka bean. You get the idea. Right, so this is the final piece. Here's some pictures of it. This is an example of the experience that's a fougere. Thanks, guys. And this is a collage of different effects and different genres. If you look really closely, you can see where some of the RGB lights have become separated because we've got the alignment wrong and stuff like that. Cool. All right. So, thanks. So now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about process and evolution in some of our projects and just the way we work. This the first project I'm going to talk to you about is from 2015. And this is a light installation we completed at the top of the Shard, which is a skyscraper in London. So this was completed on a completely crazy, bonkers timescale. They came to us in, I think, like mid-November, saying we want to build a New Year's Eve light installation at the top of like the tallest tower in Europe. And yeah, we kind of went, oh my God, how do we do this? Yeah, it was mental. So we had 6 weeks to design and build this thing. And it had to occupy the top 20 stories of the building. So the kind of the number countdown you can see there that kind of is about to turn into 2015 occupied all of the apartments in the top of the building. So each one of those flashes is actually a floor of an apartment building with a window with basically just a floodlight stuck in it. And we had to work with the Civil Aviation Authority to get clearance of the lights, so we weren't going to blind pilots and down planes. We had to work with the fire brigade to tell people the building wasn't on fire, with all the smoke coming out of the top of it, all sorts of challenges like this. But the really interesting part was because of the super compressed time frame, we didn't have time to do our normal process. So normally as designers, what we would do is we'd do some concept sketches, and then we'd visualize that, and we'd see what it would look like. And then once we'd done that, and the client was super happy with it, we'd then figure out how we were going to program it and make it happen. And we couldn't do that. So we had to shortcut the process and find a way to turn the visualization into the real thing. So we normally work with a piece of software called Cinema 4D, and we use that to make our animations and test our motion and stuff like that. But we had to write some custom plugins for Cinema 4D that enabled us to output DMX data, so essentially data that can drive lights and control stuff. So that it completely shortcut the process. The visualization becomes the programming. So that kind of led us to do some more experimenting. So this is just us faffing about, messing around with some stuff. And it's kind of Jason walking up and down. But it's essentially, it's using the DMX control for the light. But this time we're adding an input into the system. So this time we've put an Xbox Connect plugged into Cinema 4D that knows where you are in space, and it just makes the beams of light go up and down. So that led on to this, which was a project that never happened, sadly. This was a test for it. It was supposed to be a catwalk. But that project then led on to this project. So this is a immersive lighting installation for a lighting festival in York. So the brief was to create a 5-minute-long installation that responded to the architecture of the cathedral. We wanted to create a volume within a volume, so a volume of light within the volume of the architecture. get the idea. So, thank you. So by this project, the tools have got a bit more sophisticated. So this is a bit of kind of behind the scenes. So, you animate a single light. Great thing about computers is then you can multiply that really easily, play around with them, and you can stick them in space. So a lot of it is also about testing one-to-one, so no one had done this before as far as we knew, so we had to get the data out of cinema into the moving headlight sources. It's in our studio. You learn a lot during this process, so it turns out that moving headlights are really imprecise, whereas obviously the stuff we're doing in cinema is super precise. So when you're trying to get beams of light to follow each other, you just have to continuously recalibrate the whole thing. This is the setup, a lot of rigging. Adam's one of our visualisers, working his magic. All right, so you get the idea. So that project then led on to this one. Thanks. So again, it's kind of this is just it's about evolution and process of the project. So we were invited to come up with an idea. So we're invited to do this project in Hull for the so Hull's a city in the north of the UK, and it has this UK Capital of Culture in 2017. And we were invited to do the closing piece for it. So we were asked to generate this idea that would draw people into the old town, that would move them into the streets through the old town at night. And so we came up with this kind of loose idea that we wanted to put beams of lights down the streets and draw people through them. So there are 4 locations chosen throughout the city. So first location's at Beverley Gate, which is kind of the entrance to the old town, then Trinity Square, which is by the cathedral, and then you've got kind of the museum quarter and Wilberforce House, which are kind of like the historic museum area of the city. There we go. Right, so we imagine these things as both beacons for the old town, but also a series of intelligent light characters that would kind of perform and guide you through the streets, stitching the city together. This time we wanted to use industrial robots instead of moving headlight sources because we wanted them to be kind of characters. We wanted them to be performative, to inhabit the city with their kind of own being. We ended up using these pretty much exact robots, and here they are in the 1990s making Land Rovers, which is their kind of previous life. And we start to develop some of the kind of, these are some of the early visualizations, what we'd imagined these things as kind of actors, performers sitting in the city, how it could look. So again, we kind of started to up our game with Cinema 4D. So this time we're starting to do something called inverse kinematics, which is figuring out kind of motion of robots. Again, because it's a computer, it's brilliant, so you can do all of this stuff really easily in terms of multiplying and arraying and doing performative stuff. We then got a baby one to play with. This is like a quarter-size version of the real thing, which we stuck in the back of our studio, and we stuck all the different kind of bits to the end on it and figured out how to make it move. And yeah, there's Joe with a, I don't know what that is stuck on the end of it, something. There's Jeffrey getting excited. And yeah, some kind of coding stuff. That's when it was a giant spoon. So then we went to go see the big things. So these are the full-size ones. And again, it's a similar kind of iterative testing process. So you do the tests on the small ones, and you do the tests on the big ones, and you just add a layer of complexity each time. So the next layer of complexity we wanted to add is some maths. So let's figure out, if you've got beams of light, can you shine them between multiple robots, between multiple objects? Can you create kind of spaces out of light using these robotic arms and characters? Which we could. It took a lot of practice. These robots, by the way, when we got them, these robots, the data input system for them was a floppy disk drive. So they're really, really old. And the guys that normally program them saw us as basically a bunch of idiots from East London with laptops coming up and expecting to be able to make a move, and they're kind of scratching their heads. But the guys, our kind of creative technology guys, are really, really talented at what they do, and that's why we're able to make them do what we wanted them to do. Once we got the hang of the robot control, we were starting to get a bit more confident about imagining what these different installations could be, and starting to do the choreography for them. So these are the 6 robots which sit at Beverley Gate, which is the entrance to the Old Town, and these are having a conversation over the street with one another, and with the people who kind of inhabit the street below. These are 3 robots. These are just 3 different versions of the same sequence in Museum Quarter. And these ones this is a piece that's about collaboration, about working together. And of course, we had to work out some of the maths of this stuff too, with all the light beams. And this is a group of 9 robots which are sat on really, really high plinths in Trinity Square by the cathedral. And these are having conversations with the people who inhabit the square underneath them. And then finally, this is a piece at the Wilberforce Museum, which is having a conversation with a statue of William Wilberforce. So he was a prominent anti-slavery campaigner who came from Hull. Okay, so installation and kind of engineering and thinking about this stuff. I'm not going to talk about this in too much detail, but you have to be a disaster fantasist when you're doing stuff like this. You have to try and imagine every single possible thing that could go wrong. So, is it possible for people to climb up these things? Yes, probably. So therefore, we clad it in these kind of coatings, which made it almost impossible to climb up. I just still didn't stop one person on New Year's Eve. What would happen if the robots, all at the same time, due to some kind of freak malfunction, went from their lowest possible position to their highest possible position at full speed and then stopped? Would they jump off the ground? Yes, they probably would. Okay, how far are they going to jump off the ground? How much ballast do we need? If they all swing from left to right at full speed and then stopped due to some horrible malfunction, are they going to fall over and kill someone? Is it possible that these things could collide in midair and bits could fall off and land on people's heads? You just have to imagine every possibility. So here we are. So we're going to start with Wilberforce House. by a composer we worked with, and they all, thank you very much. So the soundscapes came from the robots themselves. So we used contact mics attached to the robots to record the sounds that they made, and then we worked with the sound designer to turn those into soundscapes. It's a piece of Trinity Square. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges of doing something like this. So we'd never really worked with robots before, and then we stupidly decided we would put 21 of them outside in the winter in the UK for 6 weeks. So it was a maintenance nightmare, this project. And as a kind of a designer, you're always really, you're hopeful, you're ambitious, you hope all of these things are going to work, and largely they did. But we're also a business, and we've got to be able to make these things work financially and time-based and all of that kind of stuff. And there were a lot of learnings from this project, just in terms of scale and ambition and reach, and how much time it takes to make these things work, and also to maintain them and to keep them running. The robots themselves are actually pretty reliable. It turned out that it was all the lights and the stuff which was supposed to be waterproof and supposed to work that didn't work. Okay, and then finally, thank you. A bit of behind the scenes overlaid with the real thing. Great thing about doing stuff with computers and digitally is, what you visualize actually turns out to be the real stuff. So I'm almost out of time, but I'm just going to quickly show some what's next. Where does this go next? So we're talking about process and evolution of projects. This is a commission in Tokyo, which we're currently working on for the Tokyo Festival, which is a festival that happens at the same time as the 2020 Olympics, so next summer in Japan. So it's a piece which is about body in motion. So it's the Olympics. It's about bodies. It's about movement. It's also about abstract nature. So taking lots of reference from Zen gardens. And it's also, of course, about kind of the future of man and machine, where we're going with technology, that kind of conversation. So what we're doing, we're making a Japanese Zen garden that's tended by industrial robots. Now, the robots are making marks which are captured from the motion of the athletes in the Olympics, and that will be then they're kind of transcribed through some scripting. Again, this is more stuff we're doing. kind of behind the scenes, sorry for the green flashes, into a series of kind of 2D diagrams and drawings, and we're kind of still figuring out what those drawings might be and what that process might be to create those drawings captured from motion. But the idea is that you get a constantly evolving series of drawings or marks made within the Zen garden, which are captured from the motion of the athletes during the Olympics itself. Of course, we could tell stories. This is a very simple one, but we could tell complex stories about races and all that kind of stuff. And then finally, this is last week, and this is our studio, and here's a robot making a very satisfying circle. We're going to go a bit more high-tech than wooden sticks, I think, but, you've got to start somewhere. Cool, that's it. Thank you very much.